Seattle's a city that wears its gray like a badge, the kind of place where the rain taps a restless rhythm on your roof, and the air hums with something unspoken. I've lived here long enough to know its moods, to feel its damp breath on my skin, but never long enough to shake the itch it plants deep inside me. My name's Grace, and at 50-something, I've got a life most would call steady, married to Henry, a man who's as predictable as the tide. He's a good guy, don't get me wrong, the kind who pays the bills on time and mows the lawn every Sunday. But steady can start to feel like a cage when you've been in it for decades, and lately I've been pacing the bars. It was Henry's idea to rent out the spare room. "Extra cash, Grace," he said over breakfast one morning, his nose buried in the paper. No sense letting it sit empty. Practical as always. I nodded, sipping my coffee, but inside my pulse kicked up a notch. A stranger in our house? That wasn't just income. It was a crack in the routine, a chance for something to slip through. I didn't say that out loud, of course. Henry wouldn't get it. He sees numbers. I see possibilities. The ad went up, and a week later, Wyatt showed up. It was a Tuesday, late September, the kind of afternoon where the rain comes down in sheets and the sky's a bruised purple. I heard the knock from the kitchen, drying my hands on a towel as I crossed to the door. When I opened it, there he was, dripping wet, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, looking like he'd just walked out of a storm and didn't care. "Hey," he said, voice low and rough, like gravel under boots. "I'm Wyatt. Hear about the room?" I froze for half a second, taking him in. He was young, late 20s maybe, tall enough to fill the doorway, with shoulders that strained the seams of his soaked flannel shirt. His hair, dark and curling from the rain, stuck to his forehead, and his jaw had that scruffy edge that made you want to run your fingers along it. But it was his eyes that got me, hazel, sharp, catching the dim light like they were sizing me up too. "Come in," I managed, stepping aside. "You're soaked." He grinned, just a flicker, and brushed past me, the scent of rain and something woodsy trailing after him. "Hope I'm not too much trouble," he said, setting his bag down. Trouble? Oh, he had no idea. I shut the door, my heart thudding louder than it should have. "No trouble at all," I lied, forcing a smile. "Let me show you the room." The spare room's upstairs, a small space with a slanted ceiling and a window overlooking the backyard. I led him up, pointing out the basics: bed, dresser, closet, like some tour guide trying to keep her cool. He nodded along, quiet but attentive, his boots leaving faint wet prints on the hardwood. "Looks good," he said finally, turning to me. "I'll take it." That voice again, warm, steady, sinking into my chest like a slow burn. I swallowed, nodding back. "Great. I'll get the paperwork." Downstairs, Henry shook his hand, all business, while I hovered near the counter, pretending to fuss with the kettle. Wyatt moved like he owned the space already, easy and sure, peeling off his wet jacket to reveal a t-shirt clinging to a frame that didn't quit. Broad chest, arms corded with muscle from whatever he did to keep himself that way. "Mechanic," he'd said. Worked at a garage downtown. I caught myself staring at the way his damp hair curled at the nape of his neck and turned away fast, cheeks hot. That night, I lay awake next to Henry, his snores a soft drone against the patter of rain outside. The house was still, but my mind wasn't. Wyatt was just down the hall, unpacking that duffel bag, settling into our lives. I pictured him there, shirt off maybe, stretching out on the bed, and my fingers tightened on the sheets. Why did he already feel like a spark in this damp gray world? I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come, but all I could hear was that gravelly hay echoing in my head. Trouble indeed. Weeks slipped by, and Wyatt settled into the house like he'd always been part of it. He kept to himself mostly, coming and going with the rhythm of his garage shifts, but I couldn't help noticing him. The way he'd lean against the counter in the morning, coffee in hand, his voice rough from sleep when he'd say, "Rain's never gonna let up, huh?" I'd nod, stirring my own mug, my eyes tracing the line of his shoulders under his faded t-shirts. He was polite, too polite maybe, fixing a dripping faucet one day, hauling firewood the next, always with that quiet strength that made my pulse stutter if I let myself look too long. It was a Thursday when it happened. One of the shelves in his room had come loose, a wobbly thing Henry'd been promising to fix for months, but never did. I found Wyatt in the hall after dinner, toolbox in hand, and caught his eye. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone light. "That shelf's driving me nuts. Think you could take a look?" He glanced over, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. "Sure thing, Grace." My name in that gravelly drawl hit me harder than it should have, and I turned quick, leading him upstairs before he could see the flush creeping up my neck. In his room, the air smelled faintly of motor oil and cedar. His scent, I'd started to realize. He set the toolbox down, rolling up his sleeves as he eyed the shelf. "Shouldn't take long," he said, stepping onto a stool I'd dragged over. I stayed below, arms crossed, telling myself I was just there to help. But then he reached up, shirt riding just high enough to show a sliver of tanned skin above his jeans, and my breath caught. His arms flexed, muscles shifting as he twisted a screw, and I bit my lip, heat curling low in my stomach. I wasn't supposed to look, not like this, but my eyes wouldn't behave. He must have felt it because he paused, glancing down at me mid-motion. Our gazes locked, and for a split second the room went still. His hazel eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd caught me out, and then that smirk, small, knowing, curved his lips. "You good down there?" he asked, voice dipping low. I blinked, scrambling for words. "Yeah, just making sure you don't fall," I said, but it came out shaky, unconvincing. He chuckled, soft and deep, and went back to work, leaving me standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs. When he finished, he stepped down, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All good now," he said, stretching his arms up, his shirt pulling tight across his chest. I watched the way his biceps tensed, the casual power in how he moved, and muttered a quick, "Thanks," my voice lower than I meant it to be. He nodded, brushing past me to grab a water bottle from his desk, and I caught the faintest whiff of sweat and cedar as he went. "Anytime." He tossed over his shoulder, that easy grin flashing again, the kind that could unravel a woman if she wasn't careful. I made it back to my room in a daze, shutting the door and leaning against it like I'd just run a mile. Henry was downstairs, buried in his ledgers, oblivious as always. I crossed to the bed, sinking onto the edge, my body buzzing with something I hadn't felt in years, the image of Wyatt up there, shirt hitched, skin gleaming under the dim light, played on a loop in my head. I pressed my palms to my thighs, trying to steady myself, but it was no use. That smirk, that voice, the way he'd looked at me, it had lit a match, and now I was burning. Lying back, I stared at the ceiling, the house quiet, except for the faint hum of Seattle's rain. Henry'd be asleep soon, predictable as clockwork, but sleep wasn't coming for me. Not tonight. I wanted to see Wyatt again, alone, no toolbox or shelves between us. It was a bad idea, I knew that, but the want was louder than the warning, and as I closed my eyes, I wondered how long I could keep pretending it wasn't there. Henry left for a weekend conference on Friday, his suitcase packed with the precision of a man who lives by spreadsheets. "Back Sunday night," he said, pecking my cheek before the cab pulled away. The house felt hollow without him, the rain drumming harder against the roof like it knew I was alone and restless. I spent the day pacing, the gray light filtering through the blinds doing nothing to settle me. By evening I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped into a thin cardigan, soft and loose, the kind that hints without screaming, and stood outside Wyatt's door, my pulse a steady thud in my ears. I knocked, sharp, deliberate, and waited. Footsteps, then the door swung open. Wyatt stood there, barefoot in a faded t-shirt and jeans that hung low on his hips, his hair still damp from a shower. "Hey," I said, leaning against the frame, my voice just shy of steady. "Couldn't sleep." His hazel eyes flicked over me, sharp and searching, before he stepped aside. "Me neither," he said, low and rough, letting me in. I brushed past him, my shoulder grazing his chest, and the heat of him hit me like a wave. The door clicked shut, and the air thickened, the rain a dull roar outside. His room was the same, neat but lived in, a jacket tossed over a chair, that faint cedar scent curling around me. I turned, letting my fingers play with the hem of my cardigan, and perched on the edge of his bed. He watched me leaning against the desk, arms crossed, waiting. "Henry's gone till Sunday," I said, glancing down at the floor, then back up at him. My knee brushed his as he stepped closer, sitting beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, and I traced a slow line along his thigh with one fingertip, testing the waters. I expected him to tease, maybe pull back, but instead he let out a low laugh, like he'd been waiting for this. His hand caught my wrist, firm but gentle, stopping me cold. The other slid around my waist, pulling me in with a sureness that stole my breath. "Grace," he murmured, voice rough against my ear, and then his lips were on mine, slow at first, tasting, then deeper, hungrier. I melted into him, my fingers digging into his shoulders, the solid heat of him pressing against me. My cardigan slipped, baring my collarbone, and his hand was there, tracing the line of my skin with a deliberate touch that sent a shiver down my spine. I let out a soft gasp, arching closer, and he took his time, lips brushing my jaw, then the curve of my throat. His fingers moved with that same quiet confidence, light but sure, like he already knew every inch of me. I'd thought I'd be the one steering this, drawing it out on my terms, but Wyatt wasn't waiting. His grip tightened, pulling me onto his lap, and I felt the hard planes of his body against mine, the denim of his jeans rough against my thighs. The rain pounded outside, but in here it was just us. His hands, my sighs, the way he kissed me like he'd been starving for it. Hours blurred into a tangle of heat and whispers. The cardigan hit the floor at some point, forgotten, and his shirt followed, leaving nothing but skin between us. He moved with a rhythm I couldn't predict. Slow 1 minute, urgent the next, his hands guiding me, firm and possessive, until I was trembling against him. When it was over, I collapsed into the sheets, breathless, his arm draped over me, his breath warm against my neck. The city slept outside, but I lay there, wide awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. I'd crossed a line I'd only meant to toe, and now there was no going back. I didn't want to. Wyatt shifted beside me, asleep already, and I knew one thing for damn sure. This wasn't the end of it. Morning crept in, soft and gray. The rain a steady hum against the window. Wyatt lay beside me, his bare back a rugged landscape of muscle under the dim light, his breathing slow and even. I propped myself up on one elbow, tracing the ridge of his spine with my fingers, still buzzing from the night before. His skin was warm, a faint sheen of sweat lingering, and I couldn't stop replaying it. His hands, his mouth, the way he'd taken over like he'd known exactly what I needed. I should have slipped out, kept it clean and simple, but when he stirred, hazel eyes cracking open, that smirk hit me again. "Didn't peg you for a lingerer," he said, voice thick with sleep. I arched an eyebrow, trying to play it cool. "Bed's comfortable," I shot back, but my breath hitched when he rolled toward me, pulling me down into the sheets. His laugh was low, rumbling against my skin as he kissed me. Lazy at first, then deeper. And just like that, we were tangled up again. My fingers gripped his shoulders, his hands roamed my hips, and the morning dissolved into gasps and teasing grins. When we finally collapsed, breathless and laughing, I knew I was in trouble. This wasn't a one-off anymore. It was a hunger I couldn't shake. The nights after that blurred together. Henry was still gone, and I stopped pretending I had any control. I'd knock on Wyatt's door, no excuses, no small talk, just step inside, my cardigan already slipping off my shoulders. He'd meet me halfway, lifting me like I weighed nothing, pinning me against the wall with that easy strength that made my knees weak. "You're trouble," he'd tease, lips brushing my neck as his hands slid under my shirt, warm and sure. "You like it," I'd fire back, grinning into his kiss, and he'd prove me right every time, his grip firm, his touch deliberate, pulling me under until I couldn't think straight. It was the way he moved that got me. The quiet confidence, the way he'd press me into the mattress, his body a solid heat against mine. One night he caught my wrists, holding them above my head as he kissed down my throat, slow and deliberate, like he was savoring every inch. I arched against him, a soft sound slipping out, and he smiled against my skin, that low chuckle vibrating through me. "Can't get enough, huh?" he murmured, and I didn't bother denying it. I didn't want to. He let go, hands roaming again, and we lost ourselves in the rhythm, playful 1 minute, urgent the next, until I was shaking in his arms. By the time I'd collapse against him, spent and breathless, the rain outside would be the only sound left. I'd lie there, his arms slung over me, his heartbeat steady under my cheek, and tell myself it was just physical, just a fling to break the monotony. But every time he pulled me close, every time his lips found mine in the dark, that lie got harder to swallow. It wasn't just his body I craved anymore. It was the way he looked at me, like he saw past the married woman playing a game, straight to the part of me I'd buried years ago. One evening, as I traced lazy circles on his chest, he shifted, propping himself up to watch me. "You're something else, Grace," he said, voice soft but edged with something I couldn't place. I grinned, deflecting. "Good or bad?" He didn't answer, just leaned in and kissed me, slow, deep, like he was trying to say it without words. When he pulled back, I caught my breath, my heart doing a dangerous flip. I told myself to get up, go back to my room, keep this simple. But I stayed, curled against him, the rain tapping out a warning I ignored. This wasn't just an escape anymore. It was something bigger, something I couldn't walk away from, and deep down, I didn't want to. The nights with Wyatt had become a rhythm I couldn't break, each one pulling me deeper into something I hadn't planned. Henry was still away, his conference dragging on, and the house felt like it belonged to us, me and Wyatt tangled in his sheets, the rain our only witness. But that evening, as I sat on the edge of his bed, tying my cardigan back on, something shifted. He propped himself up on one elbow, watching me with that lazy smirk, his hair tousled from my fingers. "You know you don't have to keep sneaking out," he said, voice low, teasing but with an edge I hadn't heard before. I turned, fingers pausing on the knot, my heart kicking up a beat. "I'm not sneaking," I said, forcing a smile, but it felt thin. He chuckled, sitting up fully now, the sheet slipping to his waist. "Then stay," he said, simple as that, his hazel eyes locking onto mine. It wasn't a question, it was a dare. I froze, the air heavy between us. I'd never stayed past the haze of it all, never let the morning light catch me still in his bed. "You don't get it," I whispered, looking down at my hands. The cardigan's hem crumpled in my grip. "Try me," he said, leaning closer, his voice steady but sharp, like he was tired of the dance we'd been doing. I met his gaze, my pulse racing, and felt the words clawing their way up, words I'd buried under every touch, every kiss. I opened my mouth to deflect, to keep it light, but instead they spilled out. "I think I'm falling for you," I said, barely above a breath, the confession hanging there like a crack in the quiet. The room went still, the rain outside a distant hum. His expression didn't shift, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He exhaled slow, running a hand over his jaw, and I felt my throat tighten. "Say that again," he murmured, voice rough but soft, like he needed to be sure. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling now, but there was no taking it back. "I'm falling for you, Wyatt," I said, clearer this time, my chest aching with the weight of it. He didn't move for a long moment, just watched me, and I braced myself for a laugh, a brush off, anything to snap me back to reality. But then he reached out, his hand sliding to the back of my neck, pulling me in. His kiss was different this time, slow, deliberate, like he was answering me without words. I sank into it, my fingers curling into his hair, the cardigan slipping loose again as I pressed against him. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm on my lips. "You're a hell of a woman, Grace," he said, low and quiet, and I couldn't tell if it was a promise or a warning. I didn't care. I kissed him again, harder, like I could drown the fear rising in me, the fear that I'd just handed him something I couldn't take back. We stayed like that, tangled up, his hands tracing my skin like he was memorizing me, and I let myself feel it all, the heat, the want, the terrifying pull of something real. When I finally broke away, breathless, I slid off the bed, tying my cardigan tight like armor. He didn't stop me, just watched as I crossed to the door, his smirk gone, replaced by something heavier. "Night, Grace," he said, voice soft, and I nodded, slipping out into the hall before I could say anything else stupid. Back in my room, I leaned against the door, heart pounding, the echo of his touch still burning through me. I'd meant to keep this simple, fun, physical, nothing more, but I just cracked it wide open. I was in love with him, and the truth was a weight I couldn't shake. The rain tapped against the window, steady and unrelenting, and I knew one thing for damn sure. Whatever came next, I wasn't ready to let him go, not yet. Henry was due back that afternoon, his cab rolling up any minute, and the house felt like it was closing in on me. The rain hadn't let up, a steady patter against the windows that matched the churn in my gut. I'd spent the day restless, moving from room to room, straightening things that didn't need it, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind spun. Wyatt was still down the hall, his door shut, but I could feel him there, a pull I couldn't ignore. By dusk, I gave up fighting it. I crossed to his room, knocked once, sharp and sure, my cardigan loose around me like a flimsy shield. He opened the door fast, like he'd been waiting. No shirt this time, just those damn jeans, his chest bare and shadowed in the low light. His eyes flicked over me, knowing, hungry, and he stepped aside without a word. I walked in, the door clicking shut, and we didn't bother with pretense. His hands found my waist, lifting me against him, and I wrapped my legs around his hips, my back hitting the wall with a soft thud. "Missed me already?" he murmured, lips brushing my ear, and I laughed, breathless, digging my fingers into his shoulders. "Shut up," I said, pulling him into a kiss, slow at first, then desperate, like we were racing the clock. He carried me to the bed, laying me down with a care that didn't match the heat in his eyes. This time was different. Less rush, more weight, his hands lingering as they slid under my cardigan, peeling it off like he was unwrapping something fragile. I arched into him, gasping as his mouth traced my collarbone, then lower, his touch tender but possessive, like he was staking a claim. "You're something else," he whispered against my skin, and I grinned, tugging him closer. "So are you," I shot back, my voice shaky but sure. We moved together, a rhythm of soft laughs and quiet sighs, until I was trembling beneath him, lost in the feel of him. When it was over, I lay there, his arm heavy across my waist, his breath warm against my neck. The rain tapped out a steady beat, and I stared at the ceiling, my body still humming, but my mind racing. "What now?" he asked, voice low, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my hip. I turned to him, his hazel eyes catching mine, and I didn't have an answer. "I don't know," I said, honest for once, and he nodded like he'd expected that. We stayed like that, tangled in the sheets, the silence thick with everything I couldn't say. I was in too deep, and Henry's cab was probably turning the corner. I slipped out of his bed as dawn crept in, the gray light spilling through the blinds. "Gotta go," I murmured, tying my cardigan loose, and he watched me, propped on one elbow, that smirk back but softer. "See you tonight?" he asked, half teasing, half serious. I paused at the door, heart thudding, and gave him a small smile. "Maybe," I said, slipping out before I could change my mind. Back in my room, I shut the door, the house waking up around me, pipes groaning, the faint hum of the city outside. I crossed to the bathroom, letting the shower steam up as I studied myself in the mirror. My skin glowed, my lips swollen, my hair a wild mess. I looked alive, different, like a woman I'd forgotten I could be. The water rushed over me, hot and steady, and I closed my eyes, letting the night replay. Wyatt's hands, his voice, the way he'd held me like I was his. A slow smile curled my lips, but it faded fast. I heard the front door creak open downstairs, Henry's voice calling out, "Grace, I'm home." My breath caught, the steam thick around me, and I turned off the water, stepping out into the quiet. I took a long look in the mirror, my reflection sharp and unfamiliar, and wondered how long I could keep this secret, how long I could keep Wyatt, before it all came crashing down.